So again, we are here at the podcast studio. It has been a whirlwind day, taking a trip across the ecosystem and around the world, because that's what we're doing. We're bringing it all together. And my next guest, Vasuta Agarwal, who is Chief Business Officer at InMobi, and experience across the industry, across departments, but also around the world. It's obvious what you're doing and focused on at InMobi. But when I think about it also, your position is about the strategy within the company, the operations within the company, the business development within the company. Not typically the female role, which isn't to say that you just redefine it, and who cares if it ever was or wasn't a typical female role. How are you defining this role to make it for you, Vasuta?
It's not traditional typically, and I think it was hard for me as well to get to this place, because over time I've had to sort of prove myself over different roles to get to this role. So it's been a path and a journey in that way, because I was more when I started out more engineering, consulting, very different kind of industries, and jumped into mobile advertising like 12 years back with InMobi. And the journey from there has been a lot of learning, a new function, a new role. So a lot of this has been about asking for the right opportunity, proving myself in that role, and then building enough credibility to move to the next one. So it's been a combination of having the right opportunities, but also proving over time that you can deliver in different roles, and bringing that together. And interestingly, I never thought that, okay, this is something which is, a male dominated role. For me, it was always about, okay, is this something that's interesting to me, and this is something that I can do? I never really applied an element of gender to it, getting in. I think those things are like in hindsight, right? So that's been the journey. So it's come with a lot of, delivering, proving, building credibility, to, build up to this opportunity.
And it's also, in a way, interesting that it's within one company, because sometimes it's like, okay, I'm done beating my head against a wall or whatever. I'm going to go off and do it in a new company. And that's almost like the easy way. You can just reinvent yourself and start over again. Yeah. Not saying that you had to do that within InMobi, but what you had to do was, rather than say starting over fresh, starting over with a different perspective or a different way of making your way, but not by saying, okay, I'll just scrap everything and start all over again. It had to be building. It had to be an evolution, as it were. And that's often harder. It's always easy if you want to just get rid of something, get rid of it, start over, rip it apart, build it over. You have to build on top existing. What did you draw in to do that?
It is tougher to build, but I think what made it easier was, because I was building on an element of, trust and credibility that I had built in the previous role. Because if I had to go and start afresh somewhere, I would also have to build that base of credibility again. Yes. So I think that's a strong foundation that I had, because I had done that in my earlier roles. And that sort of carried me through, or, has been the base of a lot of growth and opportunities that I got, that there was credibility there to say, okay, she has done this, she has proven herself. And so, obviously there was taking a leap of faith, even, from the other side, to say, can she do this? And I was very fortunate that way, that, my credibility compounded with this leap of faith from some of the mentors and champions in the org really helped. And so that ways, I think it was easier than starting afresh. I think the perspective part, like you said, is harder, because you're trying to build either, from 0 to 1, or like, there were places where there was already a business. How do you take it to the next level? Yeah. Or like adding product as a function in my current role, which I had never done earlier. So there was always this need to unlearn some of the previous things and then, learn again. So that also puts, you can say, some sort of good pressure on yourself to keep yourself, going. And I think that's been interesting for me, because I sometimes can get bored if, it's sort of the same thing over many years. So I think it's added a lot of, interesting challenges along the way, which have kept me going for so long, in the same organization. So in that sense, it's been good to, learn, build with a very strong foundation of credibility that I've had in the organization.
But also at InMobi, you're doing this for others as well. Not giving back in the typical sense, but I would say more about enabling or just opening the eyes of younger women to maybe not necessarily follow your example, but at least benefit from your abilities. What does that program look like inside InMobi?
So, I feel very, strongly about this, especially, for women who are just starting out and, young in their careers, because I think the decisions that you make then, the opportunities you get, the advice you get plays a big role. And I've benefited a lot from it. So, we started this program called, Winspire, which is about mentoring women early in their careers, getting them to, come talk to, people who have experience, share their doubts, share their questions, even sort of match them with the right mentors. So we've started on that journey. And we're still on that because it's something you cannot do overnight.
It's never done.
Yeah. So yeah, but I was very happy that we were able to start that, because I think the early years is a very crucial part to really shape the next couple of decades of your career. And I think having the right advice and mentors helped. It helped me immensely.
And it's also important across, all regions. Is it something that you see a greater need in certain places than others, or is this just a universal way of approaching the problem? And the problem isn't really a problem. It's really just making certain that women feel encouraged, empowered, and giving them the opportunity. It's not like, oh, you're a woman, we're just going to give this to you. No, it's about bringing out in them what they are.
I think the nature of, maybe the advice, the support system, right, has cultural nuances to it. Like, for example, women coming back from maternity breaks, right? The whole second career notion.
Yeah.
The support system is very different in different cultures and different organizations, even different countries for that matter.
Yeah.
So the kind of help or advice that they may need is very different. For example, in India, a lot of women have, families and, sort of extended families who can provide that support system. Whereas, some of, my colleagues or even friends who are, let's say, here or in Europe, they don't have a large structured family ecosystem living with them to, support them. So they need a different kind of, support and help and advice to, say, okay, how do I come back? When do I come back? What are the right opportunities for me? Things like that. So I think there are those little bit of cultural differences, but I think the questions and the problems are very similar. I think just talking helps a lot. Like I've seen that, we have this program called Coffee Conversations, where you can just, once a quarter, you make like about 5 to 6 hours to speak to anyone who wants to reach out to you across the globe.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. So through that, I've managed to speak to a couple of women here in Europe, in like finance teams, like very different backgrounds. And I realized that, they're going through very similar things that I would have, a couple of years back or going through even now. And it's just really nice to connect and, exchange, so our concerns and worries. Yes. Like even knowing that, other people are going through it is sometimes really good.
That's true, because it's just not just me. This is okay. Yeah. There are others out
Sometimes
there.
Sometimes you just want to hear that.
What I like about chatting with you, Vasuta, is you're methodical. I can see the CBO. I can see that you would be the one to be an organizer. But there's also a level of empathy in your job, because you need to understand the users. If you're thinking about how you're shaping the user experience. Give me an example of how you bring those two together in a contribution that you're particularly, I wouldn't say proud of, but you're saying, this is it. This is how I'm defining my role. And this is how I've brought the two together to make this possible.
I mean, empathy is at least I believe is at the core of, any role, because I think unless you understand all parts of, your job and the stakeholders involved, internal and external, it's very hard to do that role. And I think that's probably been, at the core of most of my roles and how I've gone about, sort of deconstructing a role. And then, okay, this is how users, this is how we think about that. This is, our customers, how we think about that. And of course, the team, right?
Yeah.
So I think bringing an element of empathy to all parts of it, is extremely, important. I think from a user lens, the way at least we do a lot of our user research is what I like best is the way we do user research by actually talking to people whom you would normally not meet, right?
Okay.
And I think the empathy that comes from that, like, a homemaker sitting in, some remote town in India, or a civil servant in Indonesia who's a working mom, some of those experiences I think have been very enriching, and then being able to shape, the user experience with it. So yeah, that's something I feel good about, especially since we're trying to shape a new category.
Yes.
User empathy has to be a very important part of it.
And build on that additional credibility, almost the same as in your career.
Yeah.
And building on that.
So credibility matters.
Yes.
And I think there's a strong foundation of that at the core of the organization as well.
So let's imagine, and I would hope it would happen, we see each other a year from now, maybe here at Mal, maybe another podcast. And you're that type of person, I can tell. You're going to be shaping and doing. I mean, your career path itself, going from consulting to InMobi, you just love challenges. You love to move. What do you want to be telling me a year from now?
It's hard to answer that. I think personally I'm in a good place, and I've never set like personal goals on that front. So I think personally I'm a content person. So
well, that's usually the best leader. I've read about that so many times. There's so many stories. The best person is the one who just steps up because it has to be done and because it is the thing to do.
Yeah.
And if you want to create a category, it's a bold job. You have to step up. You have to do it. And Vasuta, I know that it's in your DNA to do that and to come back and amaze me in a year. Yeah. So I'll leave that part to when we meet again, because I know it's going to be a great story. And may I say, truly a delightful time talking with you and understanding what you have and what you're aiming for.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy. It was a pleasure being here today.